Hello everyone. Now today I have a deck that can counter most Transfiguration decks. And since most Transfiguration decks or most meta decks currently in Genshin TCG are Transfiguration decks, this actually makes for a pretty good all-around counter, though I have to make a couple notes here. Firstly, this deck does not guarantee you victory against every possible matchup, nor does it guarantee you a victory in every matchup I'm going to show you. It just happens to be very good against Transfiguration decks. Thirdly, though I will probably title this video something like how to counter the meta or a meta killer deck or some very clickbaity style, I consider the current Genshin TCG meta to be in a relatively healthy state. There's a variety of options. There's no one or two decks that beat every other deck in the game. So there really is no reason to specifically play a meta counter deck like the one I'm going to showcase in this video. But if you are getting tired of getting completely continuously kicked in the ass by Lauma Lunar Bloom, by Flynn's round 2 OTK decks, then this is the deck for you. And here we have today's deck. It is indeed quite special looking. We are running Kujo's Sara Escoffier and the Abyss Lecter Violet Lightning. Now why this setup? Well, of course, to counter Transfiguration we have to use Transfiguration. Surprise to no one. You have to have, if you want to counter the best decks, you yourself have to use the best possible tools available to you. And like I've said in my previous videos, Transfigurations, they are just a secondary arcane card. If you are not running a Transfiguration deck, you are giving yourself a handicap, which immediately tips the favor to your opponent if they are using a Transfiguration and you are not. Anyway, the deck is very much built around a simple game plan you are soon going to see, which is why the cards may seem a bit odd. Especially some of you might be wondering, what is this card doing here? Well, you are going to find out. It actually does serve a very proper purpose in this deck, but because I'm not going to be coming back to the action cards, I can quickly mention the two cards I could say in this deck to be switched out. Almost everything here is basically probably close to, if not the best possible cards you can use for this deck, but I haven't lost yet, and the macaronis, those two are basically the ones I've considered that you could probably switch out and find some better options. Anyway, if there's anything else to say about the cards themselves, you definitely want to have double Sara talent. Of course, Sara got buffed in this latest patch. Now that her talent card effect, the +1 damage from the crow feather cover effects can be, the +1 damage from the talent card can be gained by any character, not just Electro characters as it was before. And Sara's elemental burst now deals 2 damage when it's used instead of the previous 1 damage. So this is kind of like Sara buff showcase at the same time. Anyway, I will jump into the games and actually explain what the deck is about there. And here we have the first match against Aino Lauma Kokomi Lunar Bloom. Now I myself showcased a version of that deck just in my previous video, and from what I've seen, overall Lauma Lunar Bloom decks are very popular in the current meta, but let's quickly look at the deck. Firstly, round 1. In your starting hand, Sarah Talent, of course your arcane card, we are running the Sacred Flame, which isn't actually that popular these days, but it works very well for this deck, and I'm going to explain why. For your round 1 hand, of course the arcane, you want Sarah's Talent if you get it, Changing Shifts or the 4-leaf cover card I showed earlier. Those cards you want in your starting hand. And what you want to do round 1 is what you see right here. Sarah's skill with the talent if possible. Escoffier's skill, and end your round on the Abyss Lector unless you got the 4-leaf cover card in your starting hand, in which case play that card onto the Abyss Lector and then you can end your round. We are going to see that in the later replays, but what you see here is what I consider to be usually the most the worst possible scenario. You don't get Changing Shifts, you don't get the 4-leaf cover, so you have to spend all your dice on the 2 skills and switching characters. Of course, in this case I have double woven dice, so it's no trouble at all in reality. And this is where the meta countering part of this deck comes in. Lunar Bloom decks, or any Transfiguration decks in general, are extremely predictable round 1. Because everyone who plays Transfiguration, of course, as soon as possible wants to activate the Transfiguration and get the blessing part, which actually gives you additional benefit, not just the guaranteed good dice. Because so many Transfiguration decks are so predictable, you yourself can play a very predictable strategy like any. Now I'm not gonna say anyone should immediately recognize what this deck is about. No, but any good player in my opinion, if you are a good player, you should immediately, when you see this character combo, you should guess what is going on here. Like if you don't guess, then you play too much meta, time to look outside of it and learn new things, which I'm here to do for you. So what we are doing here, as you can see, Sarah Talent to buff the Abyss Lector. Now this, of course, with the talent card, this combo had worked even before this latest patch and before the changes to the talent card. And in fact, I have played this very similar deck, of course, without Escoffier, without the Transfiguration, back when the Sacred Flame Arcane was first released. I played Sarah and I had the Dendro Eremite and the Abyss Lector, and then I also ran Sarah Lini while Abyss Lector combos back then. But those decks, they were good when they worked out, but they had a significant flaw, which was the fact that if you had bad dice round 1, the combo did not work. Which is why way back when Sacred Flame was released, the Arcane, I didn't even in the end bother doing much with the deck. It was a cool idea, but too reliant on getting good dice, and when you didn't get good dice, the deck was crap. But with the Transfigurations, with this lineup, it actually works out very well. Also, you could, because we are using Transfiguration mainly to have good dice round 1, you could have also a Nemo character instead of Escoffier, or you could replace the Abyss Lector for another Cryo character and still take use of this Transfiguration, but you could have the Electro Sword Transfiguration. But they're really running a Nemo character. I guess if you go more on the burst route, you could do that as well. Anyway, because the Transfigurations got added, the weakness of this Sarah Abyss Lector plus a third character setup was fixed, and as such, Actually, at the end of last patch was when I made this deck. But when I heard that Sarah was getting buffs, I decided to wait until this patch before doing the showcase. Anyway, now I've said a bunch of stuff and I kind of forgotten where I was, but the point is the Transfiguration fixed the dice problem. So, round 1, doing the Sarah skill, Escoffier skill, switch to Abyss Lector, you should, like, 100% of the time you should be able to play this off. Unless your opponent is playing some, I don't know, Gene or Sucrose, and, you know, continuously just using their skills to force swap you around. That would probably be the only case where you aren't able to pull this off. And I guess it also applies for some overload decks, the same scenario, but once again, because most decks, they either do sit-up, or in Transfiguration cases they do, well, in this case my opponent did sit-up so they can activate the Transfiguration first thing next round. But yeah, this is the round 1 what you wanna do. Skill, and your round with Abyss Lector. So let's jump to round 2 and continue explanation from there. By the way, the Chef Mao and food cards you saw, if you are not running Escoffier, then you can also switch those cards, though I do recommend keeping Adeptus Temptation in the deck. But because Escoffier gives us food cards, and anyway applies a lot of cryo, it's Escoffier is probably, if you are going for the double Electro and 1 cryo character setup, this Escoffier and having Chef Mao is probably the best you can do. Now, because we played the Flames of War round 1 and because we had summons, which once again, most meta decks, even those which do include summons, they don't deal enough damage that you wouldn't get the Flames of War effect. The only exception, like when you need to play Flames of War before you actually do skills with your characters, that I've run into in the current meta, is if your opponent has Flims, Ineffa, Furina, and they do Furina skill plus Ineffa skill. In that scenario, the combination of shields the opponent has and the extra damage Flinch's passive talent deals to your characters mounts up to so you don't get the Flames of War effect unless you have played the Arcane before doing Escoffier and or Sarah's skill. But we are gonna get back to that later when we actually face off against such decks. Anyway, start of round 2, ideally you get good dice, of course, because the summons have the downside of course activating our Transfiguration, meaning you don't get guaranteed good dice. But this is where whatever draw power, whatever cards you get from Escoffier's cooking mech come relevant. We use those to tune away and get good dice. Now, of course, my opponent did just activate their Transfiguration there. And this is once again what I talk about the opponent's decks being very predictable. Of course, they would activate the Transfiguration when they get the chance. Why wouldn't they? But the thing is, we can punish them for that. I think I play the Transfiguration here. You probably saw when I showed the action cards of the deck, we do have 2 copies of Art of Sleepy Meditation to discount the Blessing. But more often than not, I don't even play the Blessing round 2. Usually the Blessing, of course, why am I using specifically this and not, for example, the Electro Swirl Blessing? If I just, need good dice, it is because of the extra damage you get from superconduct reactions, because in the cases where Abyss Lector is incapacitated, killed, Escoffier and Sarah do very little damage without this Blessing. That's why we have it. And that's why we always... well, okay, 99% of the time you want to take the 3 cost, but in very, like, in matches where you know that, okay, your opponent's deck cannot threaten you, you can just take the 1 cost blessing and play that immediately to, you know, guarantee good dice for round 2. But anyway, what this deck is about, because the opponent, of course, very predictable, they want the Transfiguration to activate, but we are simply going to punish them for that. Now, where did all of that damage come from there? Of course, the Abyss Lecter's skill is 3 base damage buffed by the Crowfeather cover, in this case with Sarah's talent, meaning +2 damage. On top of that, Flames of War for +1 damage, not to mention all possible extra damage we can get from reactions, from cooking damage food cards, from Adeptus, from, okay, that was an elemental skill, you cannot play Adeptus immediately, but also from Mystic Soup. Note that Tandoori Chicken, while it might seem like a good option for the deck, is actually not that great, simply because you are very limited with your dice round 2. Because if you saw the round 1 like setup what you need to do, skill, end your round with Abyss Lecter, you won't have dice for any sort of setup. But once again, for my deck that doesn't matter. What this deck is about is punishing your opponent for their predictability round 2. And that's exactly what you saw here. 1 character already out of the game. Oh, they got the Bloom Blessing, well, good for them. But you know, next round we have the burst coming. And of course, Sarah's talent has now run out, but in this case I've played the Superconduct Blessing, so what does it matter, I get the extra damage from there. And would you look at that, Adeptus Temptation, wants more extra damage. Not to mention, Abyss Lecter is in this deck for a very specific reason, because of the revive mechanic. This, number 1, makes it so that your opponent has much harder time to actually take out Abyss Lecter fast. Secondly, when the revive procs, it's there, your character deals +1 damage, meaning that even though Sarah's buff has run out, we can just enjoy that extra damage anyway. And that's how you counter the meta. Now in the next replays I'm gonna talk a lot less, so let's just jump right into them. Now, Kave Bloom isn't considered to be exactly, you know, top of the meta, but it's one of those decks that many other decks tend to struggle against. But not this deck. Once again, in this deck, in this match, you get to notice that the revive has a running the Abyss Lecter specifically as the DPS character is a very good idea for decks like, against decks like Kave. Note, you saw there I actually played Strategize, which of course meant that I wouldn't have the dice to end my round on Abyss Lecter. Playing Strategize or any 1 cost card is allowed in this deck if you have Woe and Die, Changing Shifts or the Fall Leaf cover in your starting hand. If you don't have any of those in your starting hand, do not spend your dice on anything, just go for the skill, end your round on Abyss Lecter setup. Now my opponent, of course, quite surprisingly actually played Paimon and their arcane card there. You probably noticed it, the Sands of Time or something. Lost Legacies in the Sand, the Defiled. Of course, I suppose what is considered to be the optimized Kave deck, you know, runs 5 arcane cards, but I'm guessing my opponent's version doesn't have that, so playing the Lost Legacies is completely fine, and not to mention they played Paimon, so that's not a bad idea. But once again, this is why the Abyss Lecter, oh no, whatever will I do about that Bloom core? If only I could, I don't know, almost immediately kill a cover. Now, of course, you could notice if I had gotten the +2 damage food card from Escoffier's cooking mech, that would have been Cave down with my first skill, and as is usual with Cave decks, the moment Cave is taken out, you have basically already won the game. With the only exception being if the opponent's Cave has actually used a burst and they have a few of those burst scans ready. But you can see here, it doesn't matter what my opponent does. Once again, even though tuning the blessing would be a good idea, we purposefully keep the blessing just so if it's necessary we can buff Escoffier's and Syra's damage. Of course, specifically and only the reaction damage, but it's still good to always keep that Transfiguration as, or the blessing, as long as possible. And you can see here my opponent does whatever pathetic little moves they can think of. But yeah, you can see the setup, the round 1 what you wanna do, always the same. Ideally you get such good cards that, in this case of course Gamblers and whatnot allowed me to do 2 skills and a burst round 2, which is the ideal scenario for this deck. Anyway, on to the next match. Now, like I mentioned there at the start, this deck does not guarantee you victories just because it is good at punishing Transfiguration decks. And Arlecchino decks are one of those harder matchups. Especially if they're running Arlecchino double Geo, because the Geo Resonance and plus Arlecchino and plus Tenacity, that combo alone, even without the remelting, I think, blessing, even without that, like Tenacity, Geo Resonance, they provide enough protection that your opponent is actually able to tank most of the damage from the Abyss Lecter, and they are at the same time able to take out Abyss Lecter, making it so that you lose your number 1 DPS character and lose the game. And while I've had limited amount of matches against Arlecchino double Geo decks or overall Arlecchino Lava Blessing Transfiguration decks, I've only lost once, and that was against like I faced the same person 2 matches in a row. First match I win, second match when my opponent knew what I was playing, they were able to win. So it really, like, in Arlecchino double Geo or Arlecchino Arlecchino Pyrocrystallize Transfiguration decks, it really comes down to whether your opponent respects the damage you do and whether they are able to like play around it, whether they get lucky with their cards getting Geo Resonance and whatnot. Actually, at the same time I could mention there's a second difficult matchup. At least in my head it is difficult because unfortunately I did not find a single person playing the deck when I was collecting the replays for this video, but the Ifa Heizo Electros World deck, that, based on my calculations that I made in my own head, is a difficult matchup. Mostly because if the opponent is able to pull off Transfiguration, the Blessing and a Swirl, which if you're playing Ifa, it is very easy if you have the proper action cards to pull that off. In my head, when I made the calculations for that matchup, if they are able to pull off round 1 Blessing and a Swirl with that Blessing, it is a difficult matchup to win unless you get lucky. If your opponent pulls off the round 1 Transfiguration Blessing and a Nemo Resonance, you basically are guaranteed to lose with this deck. And I can mention, while I do advertise this deck as being a very good meta counter, or at least very good Transfiguration deck counter, that does not translate to other decks. I already mentioned Gene and Sucrose and Overload, but on top of that, freeze decks are complete pain in the ass to play against with these decks, because the moment Abyss Lector is frozen, like, your damage falls off so greatly that it becomes very hard to actually take out the opponent. Secondly, any aggro deck that goes all out from round 1, not the sort of like, not combo decks like that collect Yoimiya Burst or something, those decks are easy to beat with this. But what is it, Xinyan Beatstick, for example, is a deck I lost to while playing this, because of course Xinyan, able to create shields with her elemental skill, was able to protect itself enough so that I could not one-shot it with a skill from the Abyss Lector at the start of round 2, which basically meant that the revive procced from the Abyss Lector, and once I was able to take out Xinyan, my opponent also was able to take out Abyss Lector, and since Xinyan Beatstick deals AoE damage, especially since round 1 you start with, you know, Sarah Escoffier, then go to, you know, you get the point, you have taken a lot of damage with your off-field characters. So any very high damage aggro deck that goes all out round 2 and is all out round 1 and is able to keep up high damage from round 2 onwards, they are difficult matchups. But any deck that revolves around doing some kind of setup round 1, whether that is collecting a burst, whether that is trying to get that Transfiguration to activate, those decks are very easy to beat with this deck, with the harder matchups being something like Arlecchino, Double Geo, or specifically IFA Electros World X, because they are able to deal enough damage, and especially if it's, you know, the IFA Heizo deck. Of course, if Heizo's one skill from Heizo is enough to take out the Abyss Lector once the revive has activated. But yeah, if you are able to, like, against IFA Heizo, because I'm not gonna be showcasing it in this video, I can quickly mention what my thought process for that matchup is. If the opponent is forced to switch to Heizo, or IFA is killed before the revive on the Abyss Lector activates, it is most likely your victory. And if the opponent is able to proc the revive before they are forced to switch to before IFA is killed, or they are forced to or switch to Heizo in general, then you have most likely lost. Anyway, couple more games for today. Now for the 2 last games for today, we have these lovely round 2 sweep decks, with the first one Genshin double Nordcry characters. Now that deck, I think that was made last patch when Aino and the Nordcry Resonance cards were released, so it's not particularly new, but if your deck isn't able to, you know, threaten or punish Yunjin going all out round 2, that deck is very, very strong. But luckily I have a deck that can do exactly that, which is round 2 threaten to take out basically any character. By the way, in this match I believe I finally play the full leaf sigil, yeah, card, and you get to see why it actually works very well. I've got this is a rare card if you haven't seen it, but it does. At the end phase you switch to the character with this effect. You can only have this effect on one of your characters, meaning if you play a second copy of this card, the previous one is disappears. And this is considered, you know, a character status, so if you play this on an off-field character, your current active characters effects like healing from mushroom pizza or something, they activate before this card activates. Also here, this is the wrong order. You see here, the golden troop doesn't get any stacks. But you can actually, I've seen it, I know this is possible, and I have exactly one explanation for it, why it didn't happen here. You have to play the golden troop before the 4-leaf sigil if you want the golden troop to get a 1 stack. Because I've seen it, it can get 1 stack. I've seen it happen, I know it is possible. If you want to get that golden troop stack before you are switched to the character with the 4-leaf sigil, play the golden troop first. That is the only explanation I have.
Ready to spice things up.
As to how to get the golden troop to activate before the 4-leaf sigil, and like I said, I've seen it happen. I know it is possible. Anyway, in this match you saw, unfortunately I got awful dice, because round 2 I want electro dice. Luckily, there's something very simple I can do in this matchup, which is simply to bluff my opponent. You can see they've drawn their whole deck. They have the setup. But so do I. There is the Crow Feather cover, there is the Flames of War onto the Abyss Lector. They don't know what cards I have in hand. They have to fear. Fear the possibility that I'm able to snipe Genshin. As such, what I do in this matchup, because I have bad dice, note that if I had good dice, I most likely would have just, you know, done a skill with Abyss Lector onto I know, or onto Inefa. Of course, Inefa is a kill. I know would, because I know has 1 energy, and if you didn't know, Abyss Lectors, I think it's in the elemental skill. If the opponent is affected by Electro and have energy, the opponent's character must have energy for this to work. If the opponent is affected by Electro and has energy on them, steal 1 energy from them, meaning doing a skill to I know would immediately give me 2 energy for the Abyss Lector, which means my second action would of course be an elemental burst, which deals extra damage when the opponent doesn't have energy, and of course Genshin doesn't have any energy, so the elemental burst would be able to take out Genshin. You can see I actually ended up doing a skill with Escoffier, and I still end up switching to Escoffier. This was actually, I did count it so that my opponent would have to take as many actions as possible here to be able to take out the Abyss Lector. Of course, we are taking advantage of the revive here. And I played a food card onto Sarah. I think that was with the idea that the burst plus 1 normal attack would not have been enough, but I think I forgot to consider the talent card from my opponent. But you can see they've already run out of dice thanks to the earlier swap stalling, and now my opponent has probably ran out of tricks. I mean, there is nothing my opponent can do at this stage. Like, yeah, they have the setup, but at this stage, like, they weren't able to finish or swipe me in the last round. What hope do they have this round? Once again, actually playing the food card here was too early. I forgot that, of course, the talent card from Genshin also affects other characters, not just Genshin. So Aino actually was able to proc the revive.
I will lead us to victory.
Switching characters specifically for this purpose, trying to bait out that kill. Because they had the gamblers, I was very sure that they were actually going to take out Sarah, but gamblers, I haven't lost yet. We take out Genshin, my opponent. They have literally nothing they can do. simply a normal attack so that I have good dice, I can do any skill in the book. And my opponent gives up, realizing that there's no hope. But we have one more similar game for today. And here we have the Flins round 2 sweep. What is it? OTK, I think they call it. This patches version of the same deck, basically.
I will lead us to
Once again, round 1, we keep the talent card. We want to keep our free artifacts, of course, because those cards we can play no matter our other cards. The very basics of this deck, like the starting hand, you want your free cards, you want your free artifacts. So you have some way of getting extra cards or save dice with the golden drupe. Of course, my opponent's game plan very similar to the last guy. Of course, the only difference really is that they want to do one Mona skill round 1, which they will do here in just a moment, like so. Now, of course, because actually here I can mention, you can see sometimes you end up activating the Transfiguration with your Escoffier skill, like I do here. And if you have good dice, or good cards more specifically, you need like 2 woven die, you need 2 changing shifts, or you need 1 change or 1 4-leaf cover sigil thing, and extra die. But anyway, if you have good cards, you can play Art of Sleep and Art of Sleepy Meditation in your starting hand. You can play the Transfiguration round 1, which is what I consider with this deck the best possible scenario, being able to play the Blessing round 1. Because of course your summons guarantee the activation of it round 1, so it's actually worth it. And it also guarantees you good die round 2, so even if you don't have good cards, it doesn't matter, you have good dice. And that's all you need with this deck. And by the way, here you get to see, this is the true punishment you can do with this deck. The ideal setup, Sarah Talent, double superconduct by our summons and skills, the +2 damage food, and of course the Flames of War on the Abyss Lector. And with Gamblers, this is the ideal scenario for sniping characters, and like mentioned, you can pull off the exact same scenario with the Blessing already on the field if you get good cards round 1. And that is like the perfect scenario, but this is like the more realistic ideal scenario where you have the damage +2 damage food, the talent card. Like actually, I would even say the talent card plus the +2 damage food, that is like the cards you want to get most often, because they guarantee you actually deal good damage. But yeah, all you really need is that, and afterwards, you know, of course I end up tuning cards here. After you words, you just do this. Ta-da! Okay, I was remembering my opponent would give up immediately after if Flins was sniped here, but anyway, this is the beauty of the deck. I suppose I could here at the end mention, being able to counter the Transfiguration deck, it is not just a privilege of this deck specifically. Like, if other decks that are able to go all out round 1 and keep it up round 2, those decks are still very also, they are also very good against Transfiguration. But from what I've noticed, most Transfiguration decks are able to deal with AoE damage. Like, think about the Bloom Blessing Amrita decks, they usually like run double hydro, so they have hydro resonance for AoE damage. Those pyro crystallized transfiguration decks, they have geo resonance, they get shields from crystallized reaction and the transfiguration blessing. Like they do get that sort of survivability that they can either keep one key character alive or they are just simply able to heal their whole team. So in my opinion, while AoE damage decks are good, they are good at threatening transfiguration decks, I personally think that strong single target damage is what you need to best counter transfiguration decks, like in general. Because like if you look at the most popular meta decks, most of them are transfiguration decks. Most of them are the kind where if you take out one key character early, the victory is basically guaranteed. Like I mentioned, even though I don't showcase it in this video, Ifa, Hazo, Electrosphere, if you take out Ifa early, which you can do, it requires ideal cards from you, but you can do it. Of course, Ifa is definitely because Ifa's technique heals, but from how it goes in my head, you should be able to, with good cards, with good luck, you are able to snipe Ifa at the start of round 2. Unlikely, but possible. Yeah. So, and this is of course, once Ifa is taken out, Hazo no longer gets declension stacks, making that deck easy to beat, because Hazo without declension is not a big threat when you are able to deal big damage. And the same applies Bloom decks. They have mostly AoE heal, and yes, I have beaten Yungasaur's double Notkai character deck as well. They were even able to pull off double Amrita in the matchup, and I still kicked their ass. I have beaten, well, okay, Vaporized Blessing decks, they aren't that much in the meta, but I have beaten those ones as well. But yeah, the main point what I was supposed to say here, it is not specifically this deck that is able to do that. Like you can, what is it, the Cryo Fatui Ambusher operative. You can use that card instead of a Beast Lecter and just run Cryo Resonance and pretty much achieve the same sort of results as with this deck. Of course, if your main DPS is Cryo character, having Escoffier isn't that great of an idea, because what point do you have doing Electro when your main DPS are what point you do have dealing Cryo damage when your main DPS character also does the same damage? You don't get any additional reaction bonus damage. Anyway, to end this video, my point here is to say, if you want to counter Transfiguration decks, simply play decks that are able to deal high single target damage with a bit of AoE damage mixed in, and aim to take out key characters like Ifa in Electrosphere decks, like Lauma in Lunar Bloom decks, like Flins in Lunar Charged decks. Once that key character is out of the game, you basically just win. Anyway, I'll see you all next time.